This episode is brought to you by Cologuard. Do you know what's really scary? Not screening for colon cancer when you turn 45. The Cologuard test is non-invasive, requires no special prep or time off work, and ships right to your door. In just 3 simple steps, Cologuard takes the scare out of colon cancer screening. If you're 45 or older and at average risk, ask your healthcare provider about the Cologuard test. Cologuard is available by prescription only. Learn more or request a prescription today at Cologuard.com/screen.
Zootopia 2 has come home to Disney+.
Let's go!
Get ready for a new case.
We're the greatest partners of all time!
New friends.
Gary the Snake.
And your last name?
The Snake.
Dream Team. New habitats.
Zootopia has a secret reptile population.
You can watch the record-breaking phenomenon at home. Zootopia 2, now available on Disney+, rated PG. And right now you can get Disney+ and Hulu for just $4.99 a month for 3 months with a special limited time offer. Ends March 24th. After 3 months, plan auto-renews at $12.99 a month. Terms apply.
Thanks for listening to the Red Treehouse, where I tell you scary stories to keep you up at night. You can listen to the Red Treehouse wherever you stream podcasts. Just be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. Oh, and leave a 5-star review. The Red Treehouse is dedicated to my dad. I love you, Pop. Today is St. Patrick's Day, and though I'm Puerto Rican and have never really observed it as a holiday, I know lots of folks and listeners do. So the other day, I started thinking about spooky and scary stories from Ireland, and I hit the proverbial pot of gold. In this episode of the Red Treehouse, I'm going to tell you a series of scary stories from Ireland's history, hauntings in and around Dublin, and strange poltergeist experiences. So sit back, turn down the lights, pull up the covers, and pay close attention as we dive into true Irish ghost stories. I'm your host, Will. Welcome to the Red Treehouse. Haunted houses in or near Dublin. Of all species of ghostly phenomena, that commonly known as haunted houses appeals most to the ordinary person. There is something very eerie in being shut up within the 4 walls of a house with a ghost. The poor human being is placed at such a disadvantage. If we know that a gateway or road or field has the reputation of being haunted, we can in nearly every case make a detour and so avoid the unpleasant locality. But the presence of a ghost in a house creates a very different state of affairs. It appears and disappears at its own sweet will, with a total disregard for our feelings. It seems to be as much part and parcel of the domicile as the staircase or the hall door, and consequently, nothing short of leaving the house or of pulling it down, both of these solutions are not always practicable, will free us absolutely from the unwelcome presence. There is also something so natural, and at the same time so unnatural, in seeing a door open when we know that no human hand rests on the knob, or in hearing the sound of footsteps, light or heavy, and feeling that it cannot be attributed to the feet of mortal man or woman. Or perhaps a form appears in a room, standing, sitting, or walking, in fact situated in its 3 dimensions apparently as an ordinary being of flesh and blood, until it proves its unearthly nature by vanishing before our astonished eyes. Or perhaps we are asleep in bed. The room is shrouded in darkness, and our recumbent attitude, together with the weight of bedclothes, hampers our movements and probably makes us more cowardly. A man will meet pain or danger boldly if he be standing upright, occupying that erect position which is his as Lord of creation. but his courage does not well so high if he be supine. We are awakened suddenly by the feel that some superhuman presence is in the room. We are transfixed with terror. We cannot find either the bell rope or the matches, while we dare not leap out of bed and make a rush for the door, lest we should encounter we know not what. In an agony of fear, we feel it moving towards us. It approaches closer, and yet closer to the bed. And for what may or may not then happen, we must refer our readers to the pages of this book. But the skeptical reader will say, this is all very well, but there are no haunted houses. All these alleged strange happenings are due to a vivid imagination, or else to rats and mice. The question of deliberate and conscious fraud may be rejected in almost every instance. This simple solution has been put forward so often that it should infallibly have solved the problem long ago. But will such a reader explain how it is that the noise made by rats and mice can resemble slow, heavy footsteps, or else take the form of a human being seen by several persons? Or how our imagination can cause doors to open and shut, or else create a conglomeration of noises which, physically, would be beyond the power of ordinary individuals to reproduce? Whatever may be the ultimate explanation, we feel that there is a great deal in the words quoted by Professor Barrett. Quote, in spite of all reasonable skepticism, it is difficult to avoid accepting, at least provisionally, the conclusion that there are, in a certain sense, haunted houses, i.e. that there are houses in which similar quasi-human apparitions have occurred at different times to different inhabitants, under circumstances which exclude the hypothesis of suggestion or expectation. End quote. We must now turn to the subject of this chapter. Mrs. G. Kelly, a lady well known in musical circles in Dublin, sends as her own personal experience the following tale of a most quiet haunting, in which the specter does not seem to have entirely laid aside all her mundane habits. My first encounter with a ghost occurred about 20 years ago. On that occasion, I was standing in the kitchen of my house when a woman, whom I was afterwards to see many times, walked down the stairs into the room. Having heard the footsteps outside, I was not in the least perturbed, but turned to look who it was, and found myself looking at a tall, stout, elderly woman wearing a bonnet and an old-fashioned mantle. She had gray hair and a benign and amiable expression. We stood gazing at each other while one could count 20. At first I was not at all frightened, but gradually as I stood looking at her, an uncomfortable feeling, increasing to terror, came over me. This caused me to retreat farther and farther back, until I had my back against the wall, and then the apparition slowly faded. This feeling of terror, due perhaps to the unexpectedness of her appearance, always overcame me on the subsequent occasions on which I saw her. These occasions numbered 12 or 15, and I have seen her in every room in the house, and at every hour of the day, during a period of about 10 years. The last time she appeared was 10 years ago. My husband and I had just returned from a concert at which he had been singing, and we sat for some time over supper, talking about the events of the evening. When at last I rose to leave the room and opened the dining room door, I found my old lady standing on the mat outside with her head bent towards the door in the attitude of listening. I called out loudly, and my husband rushed to my side. That was the last time I have seen her. One peculiarity of this spectral visitant was a strong objection to disorder or untidiness of any kind, or even to an alteration in the general routine of the house. For instance, she showed her disapproval of any stranger coming to sleep by turning the chairs face downwards on the floor in the room they were to occupy. I well remember one of our guests, having gone to his room one evening for something he had forgotten, remarking on coming downstairs again, "Well, you people have an extraordinary manner of arranging your furniture. I have nearly broken my bones over one of the bedroom chairs which was turned down to the floor." As my husband and I had restored that chair twice already to its proper position during the day, we were not much surprised at his remarks, although we did not enlighten him. The whole family have been disturbed by a peculiar knocking which occurred in various rooms in the house, frequently on the door or wall, but sometimes on the furniture, quite close to where we had been sitting. This was evidently loud enough to be heard in the next house, for our next-door neighbor once asked my husband why he selected such curious hours for hanging his pictures. Another strange and fairly frequent occurrence was the following. I had got a set of skunk furs which I fancied had an unpleasant odor, as this fur sometimes has. And at night, I used to take it from my wardrobe and lay it on a chair in the drawing room, which was next to my bedroom. The first time that I did this, on going to the drawing room, I found, to my surprise, my muff in one corner and my stole in another. Not for a moment suspecting a supernatural agent, I asked my servant about it, and she assured me that she had not been in the room that morning, whereupon I determined to test the matter, which I did by putting in the furs late at night, and taking care that I was the first to enter the room in the morning. I invariably found that they had been disturbed. A truly terrifying sight was witnessed by a clergyman in a schoolhouse a good many years ago. This cleric was a curate of a Dublin parish, but resided with his parents some distance out of town in the direction of Malahide. It not infrequently happened that he had to hold meetings in the evenings, and on such occasions, as his home was so far away, and as the modern convenience of tram cars was not then known, he used to sleep in the schoolroom, a large bare room, where the meetings were held. He had made a sleeping apartment for himself by placing a pole across one end of the room, on which he had rigged up 2 curtains, which when drawn together, met in the middle. One night he had been holding some meeting, and when everybody had left, he locked up the empty schoolhouse and went to bed. It was a bright moonlit night, and every object could be seen perfectly clearly. Scarcely had he got into bed when he became conscious of some invisible presence. Then he saw the curtains agitated at one end, as if hands were grasping them on the outside. In an agony of terror, he watched these hands groping along outside the curtains till they reached the middle. The curtains were then drawn a little apart, and a face peered in, an awful, evil face, with an expression of wickedness and hate upon it, which no words could describe. It looked at him for a few moments, then drew back again, and the curtains closed. The clergyman had sufficient courage left to leap out of bed and make a thorough examination of the room, but as he expected, he found no one. He dressed himself as quickly as possible, walked home, and never again slept a night in that schoolroom. Marsh's library, that quaint, old-world repository of ponderous tomes, is reputed to be haunted by the ghost of its founder, Narcissus Marsh. He is said to frequent the inner gallery, which contains what was formerly his own private library. He moves in and out among the cases, taking down books from the shelves, and occasionally throwing them down on the reader's desk as if in anger. However, he always leaves things in perfect order. One unnamed witness, who for some years lived in the librarian's rooms underneath, was a firm believer in this ghost, and said he frequently heard noises which could only be accounted for by the presence of a nocturnal visitor. The present tenant is more skeptical. The story goes that Marsh's niece eloped from the palace, and was married in a tavern to the curate of Shakibhasansayed. She is reported to have written a note consenting to the elopement, and to have then placed it in one of her uncle's books to which her lover had access, and where he found it. As a punishment for his lack of vigilance, the archbishop is said to be condemned to hunt for the note until he find it, hence the ghost. The ghost of a deceased canon was seen in one of the Dublin cathedrals by several independent witnesses, one of whom, a lady, gives her own experience as follows. Canon was a personal friend of mine, and we had many times discussed ghosts and spiritualism, in which he was a profound believer, having had many supernatural experiences himself. It was during the Sunday morning service in the cathedral that I saw my friend, who had been dead for 2 years, sitting inside the communion rails. I was so much astonished at the flesh and blood appearance of the figure that I took off my glasses and wiped them with my handkerchief, at the same time looking away from him down the church. On looking back again, he was still there and continued to stare for about 10 or 12 minutes, after which he faded away. I remarked a change in his personal appearance, which was that his beard was longer and whiter than when I had known him. In fact, such a change as would have occurred in life in the space of 2 years. Having told my husband of the occurrence on our way home, he remembered having heard some talk of an appearance of this clergyman in the cathedral since his death. He hurried back to the afternoon service and asked the robestress if anyone had seen Canon. She informed him that she had, and that he had also been seen by one of the sextons in the cathedral. I mention this because in describing his personal appearance, she had remarked the same changes I had with regard to the beard. Some years ago, a family had very uncanny experiences in a house in Rathgar, and subsequently in another in Rathmines. These were communicated by one of the young ladies to Mrs. M.A. Wilkins, who published them in the Journal of the American, SPR, from which they are here taken. The Rathgar house had a basement passage leading to a door into the yard, and along this passage her mother and the children used to hear dragging, limping steps, and the latch of the door rattling, but no one could ever be found when search was made. The house bells were old and all in a row, and on one occasion they all rang, apparently of their own accord. The lady narrator used to sleep in the back drawing room, and always when the light was put out, she heard strange noises, as if someone was going around the room rubbing paper along the wall, while she often had the feeling that a person was standing beside her bed. A cousin, who was a nurse, once slept with her, and also noticed these strange noises. On one occasion, this room was given up to a very matter-of-fact young man to sleep in, and next morning he said that the room was very strange, with queer noises in it. Her mother also had an extraordinary experience in the same house. One evening, she had just put the baby to bed, when she heard a voice calling, "Mother." She left the bedroom and called to her daughter, who was in a lower room. "What do you want?" But the girl replied that she had not called her, and then, in her turn, asked her mother if she had been in the front room, for she had just heard a noise as if someone was trying to fasten the inside bars of the shutters across. But her mother had been upstairs, and no one was in the front room. The experiences in the Rathmine house were of a similar auditory nature, i.e., the young ladies heard their names called, though it was found that no one in the house had done so. We'll continue right after this quick ad break. Poltergeist is the term assigned to those apparently meaningless noises and movements of objects, of which we from time to time hear accounts. The word is German, and may be translated boisterous ghost. A poltergeist is never seen, but contents itself with moving furniture and other objects about in an extraordinary manner, often contrary to the laws of gravitation. Sometimes footsteps are heard, but nothing is visible, while at other times vigorous rappings will be heard either on the walls or floor of a room, and in the manner in which the raps are given, a poltergeist has often showed itself as having a close connection with the physical phenomena of spiritualism. For cases have occurred in which a poltergeist has given the exact number of raps mentally asked for by some person present. Another point that is worthy of note is the fact that the hauntings of a poltergeist are generally attached to a certain individual in a certain spot, and thus differ from the operations of an ordinary ghost. In the year 1910, in a certain house in Court Street, Enniscorthy, there lived a laboring man named Redmond. His wife took in boarders to supplement her husband's wages, and at the time to which we refer, there were 3 men boarding with her, who slept in one room above the kitchen. The house consisted of 5 rooms, 2 on the ground floor, of which one was a shop and the other the kitchen. The 2 other rooms upstairs were occupied by the Redmonds and their servant respectively. The bedroom in which the boarder slept was large and contained 2 beds, one at each end of the room, 2 men sleeping in one of them. John Randall and George Sinnott were the names of 2, but the name of the third lodger is not known. He seems to have left the Redmonds very shortly after the disturbances commenced. It was on July 4th, 1910 that John Randall, who is a carpenter by trade, went to live at Enniscorthy and took rooms with the Redmonds. In a signed statement, now in possession of Professor Barrett, he tells a graphic tale of what occurred each night during the 3 weeks he lodged in the house, and as a result of the poltergeist's attention, he lost 3/4 of a stone in weight. It was on the night of Thursday, July 7th, that the first incident occurred, when the bedclothes were gently pulled off his bed. Of course, he naturally thought it was a joke, and shouted to his companions to stop. As no one could explain what was happening, a match was struck, and the bedclothes were found to be at the window, from which the other bed, a large piece of furniture which ordinarily took 2 people to move, had been rolled just when the clothes had been taken off Randall's bed. Things were put straight and the light blown out. But, Randall's account goes on to say, it wasn't long until we heard some hammering in the room. Tap, tap, tap like. This lasted for a few minutes, getting quicker and quicker. When it got very quick, their bed started to move across the room. We then struck a match and got the lamp. We searched the room thoroughly and could find nobody. Nobody had come in the door. We called the man of the house, Redmond. He came into the room, saw the bed, and told us to push it back and get into bed. He thought all the time one of us was playing the trick on the other. I said I wouldn't stay in the other bed by myself, so I got in with the others. We put out the light again, and it had only been a couple of minutes out when the bed ran out on the floor with the 3 of us. Richard struck a match again, and this time we all got up and put on our clothes. We had got a terrible fright and couldn't stick it any longer. We told the man of the house we would sit up in the room till daylight. During the time we were sitting in the room, we could hear footsteps leaving the kitchen coming up the stairs. They would stop on the landing outside the door, and wouldn't come into the room. The footsteps and noises continued through the house until daybreak. The next night, the footsteps and noises were continued, but the unfortunate men did not experience any other annoyance. On the following day, the men went home, and it is to be hoped they were able to make up for all the sleep they had lost on the 2 previous nights. They returned on the Sunday, and from that night till they finally left the house, the men were disturbed practically every night. On Monday, July 11th, the bed was continually running out from the wall with its 3 occupants. They kept the lamp alight, and a chair was seen to dance gaily out into the middle of the floor. On the following Thursday, we read of the same happenings, with the addition that one of the boarders was lifted out of the bed, though he felt no hand near him. It seems strange that they should have gone through such a bad night exactly a week from the night the poltergeist started its operations. So the account goes on. Every night that they slept in the room, the hauntings continued, some nights being worse than others. On Friday, July 29th, the bed turned up on one side and threw us out on the floor, and before we were thrown out, the pillow was taken from under my head 3 times. When the bed rose up, it fell back without making any noise. This bed was so heavy, it took both the woman and the girl to pull it out from the wall without anybody in it, and there were only 3 casters on it. The poltergeist must have been an insistent fellow, for when the unfortunate men took refuge in the other bed, they had not been long in it before it began to rise, but could not get out of the recess it was in unless it was taken to pieces. It kept very bad, we read, for the next few nights. So Mr. Murphy from the Guardian office and another man named Devereaux came and stopped in the room one night. The experiences of Murphy and Devereaux on this night are contained in a further statement, signed by Murphy and corroborated by Devereaux. They seem to have gone to work in a businesslike manner, as before taking their positions for the night, they made a complete investigation of the bedroom and house, so as to eliminate all chance of trickery or fraud. By this time, it should be noted, one of Mrs. Redmond's lodgers had evidently suffered enough from the poltergeist, as only 2 men are mentioned in Murphy's statement, one sleeping in each bed. The 2 investigators took up their position against the wall midway between the 2 beds, so that they had a full view of the room and the occupants of the beds. The night, says Murphy, was a clear starlit night. No blind obstructed the view from outside, and one could see the outlines of the beds and their occupants clearly. At about 11:30, a tapping was heard close at the foot of Randall's bed. My companion remarked that it appeared to be like the noise of a rat eating timber. Sinnat replied, "You'll soon see the rat it is." The tapping went on slowly at first. Then the speed gradually increased to about 100 or 120 per minute, the noise growing louder. This continued for about 5 minutes, when it stopped suddenly. Randall then spoke. He said, "The clothes are slipping off my bed. Look at them sliding off. Good God, they are going off me," which he had ready in his hand. The bedclothes had partly left the boy's bed, having gone diagonally towards the foot, going out at the left corner, and not alone did they seem to be drawn off the bed, but they appeared to be actually going back under the bed, much in the same position one would expect bedclothes to be if a strong breeze were blowing through the room at the time. But then everything was perfectly calm. A search was then made for wires or strings, but nothing of the sort could be found. The bedclothes were put back and the light extinguished. For 10 minutes silence reigned, only to be broken by more rapping, which was followed by shouts from Randall. He was told to hold on to the clothes, which were sliding off again. But this was of little use, for he was heard to cry, I'm going, I'm gone." And when a light was struck, he was seen to slide from the bed and all the bedclothes with him. Randall, who with Sinnat had taken considerable strength of mind by staying in the house under such trying circumstances, had evidently had enough of ghostly hauntings, for as he lay on the floor, trembling in every limb and bathed in perspiration, he exclaimed, "Oh, isn't this dreadful? I can't stand it. I can't stay here any longer." He was eventually persuaded to get back to bed. Later on, more rapping occurred in a different part of the room, but it soon stopped, and the rest of the night passed away in peace. Randall and Sinnat went to their homes the next day, and Mr. Murphy spent from 11 till long past midnight in their vacated room, but heard and saw nothing unusual. He states in conclusion that Randall could not reach that part of the floor from which the rapping came on any occasion without attracting my attention and that of my comrade. What did you think of these classic, true Irish ghost stories? Comment or email redtreehousepod@gmail.com. As we turn down the lights on this episode, make plans to join me next time as we continue exploring our strange and scary world. I'm your host, Will. Thanks for joining me in the Red Treehouse.